Good morning and welcome to the Tash and Beck's flat.
Good morning, all.
How are you, Tash?
I'm all right.
Missed you last week,
Yes.
but you're better now.
I feel, yes, I'm all right.
Good.
I'm getting some sleep, which does help.
Oh, it helps massively, doesn't it?
It does, yes, definitely.
So last week we put out a wonderful interview with our wonderful friend Jason.
With Hiya, Jace.
I know. Sorry, Jason,
You're right there, gals.
for doing impressions of you. But we couldn't get on here to promote it particularly. We did a little short. Tash did a little short.
Yeah, but it sort of hasn't had many.
Yeah, it hasn't had many hits.
No.
It's a really interesting insight into what Jason's doing. So do check it out. I'll put the BitChute link below.
And this one as well. Yeah, and also it's helpful for people who are struggling a bit with stuff, isn't it? Because he's got some solutions.
He's got solutions. So if you're struggling with a claim or a court issue or, he's there.
And I did ask Jason as well. That does also include civil stuff as well. I did ask if people are having any serious problems with, say, electric or gas or council tax or HMRC as well. That system can be used for that as well, which I think is just worth pointing out. Doesn't have to be criminal per se.
Yeah, so do check that out if you haven't already on BitChute. Podcast number 60. Anyway, this is podcast number 61.
Number 61. We're going to talk about electricity.
I love it.
And the human body.
Yes.
So I thought this was a rather nice quote. So electricity is an element that is more intimate than the very air that we breathe.
Love a bit of intimacy.
Which is kind of like, think of it like that, do we? The electrical field.
Well, as we've said before, we are electrically charged, so it's actually running through us, isn't it?
Yeah, we are electric. We are electric beings. So this is a book I've been reading. Somebody on the channel did point it out to me. I've got a feeling it might have been either Owls or maybe April. Not sure, but anyway, somebody did say for me to read it.
Yes, thank you.
Might not be either of you two.
And thank you to whoever it was.
But whoever it was, you'll probably tell us. This book, and it's a fascinating book.
Invisible Rainbow. I love the name of it as well.
And it's it's a fascinating book. There's obviously lots and lots and lots of information in there. So I've just picked out a few interesting bits, sort of the scientific-y
side of it,
history sort of side of it, if you like. So back in the day, it was about 1746, so quite some time ago.
1746, yeah.
In Europe, a friction machine was developed, and it was like a glass globe, and it spun rapidly on its axis. And it was rubbed with your hands like this to produce energy. So very static. So what we'd call static.
And is that those balls where you see the thing going?
Yeah. I remember there was one of those at the Bury Head Hotel when I was a kid.
Was there?
It was like a little museum up there, and you put your hand on it and it all goes to your hands, doesn't it? The pink charge goes to your hands. It's probably a similar concept. And then they had like what they'd called an iron gun barrel, which would be hung with silk cords, and it would almost touch the globe. And that was kind of like a prime conductor that drew sparks.
Okay, so they were proving there that the metal of the gun could be close but not touching, and it would
produce sparks. Now I don't know whether the silk was relevant because it was silk cords.
It's a natural, like cotton, silk, linen, then natural. I guess the silk maybe was a good conductor or didn't interfere with what was going on.
And then they developed a bit further. They thought, well, what would happen if we can actually store this electricity? So they used water to see if it could work.
Did they call it electricity, or did they call it a charge, or did they?
It was called Leyton, Leyton, which I believe is either the hospital or the university where it was created.
Okay.
So it was called Leyton. Technology would be the word, but Leyton.
Yeah.
Okay. So they called it Leyton. Leyton jars. Thinking about it, that's a science jar, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
They're called Leyton jars, I think. So yeah. So I think that's what they kind of referred to it to. So they realised that once it was stored in water, it produced serious force, and when they were testing it on people, it was as if they were struck by lightning, but get pain, breathlessness, convulsions.
So as part of the experiments, they were firing it at people,
mainly themselves. Mainly all the academics at the time
were all getting shocked,
ended up dying basically by the end of it. They got so sick with the radiation of the electricity. Yeah, they all became really, really sick. So that was the initial thing, but over time, they kind of ridiculed those concerns that you got convulsions, that you got that. So they kind of like, that was initially what happened.
Even though the guys that kind of were discovering and exploring this were getting sick and dying.
Very, very sick.
That was completely overlooked.
They kind of overlooked it. And then by the 1750s, they started using it in hospitals, and these type of doctors were called electricians. So initially, that's what an electrician was somebody who actually was in hospital, charging people up with globes hanging off silks and gun barrels.
That sounds insane.
Basically trying to do stuff. There. So they had different levels of it. So like if you had something like arthritis, you sit on a chair with like glass legs, which I think was the installation. And then if you were slightly iller, you'd have a handheld rod connected to a prime conductor, and then the machine would be cranked up either for a minute or for hours. Yeah. So sometimes it'd just be for a minute, sometimes for hours.
Oh, how awful.
To create an electrical aura,
storm,
I suppose.
Wow.
Yeah, like an aura around you.
Yeah. Oh, what? So would it be all...
I don't know.
Oh.
It's like an electrical aura around you. And then if it was done gently, they'd feel nothing. And then the stronger the effect, obviously, the more
you'd... Yeah. A bit like a little charge, you can feel a tingle, can't you?
Yes. Yeah, I remember when I was really weird when I was younger, we used to have one of those little games, that you little played like a Space Invaders.
Yeah.
And I used to lick the end of the thing all the time.
And if you lick batteries as well.
I've never done. Wasn't a battery.
Well,
licker.
But if you find a battery, you think, has it got any charge in it or not?
Oh, and you can lick it. I just used to sit there and used to like it.
Yeah.
A bit weird. And then there was 4 little bits on it, and the bigger one was more. So I'd like 4 little spikes. But then if you had something like, if you were severely paralysed, then they would charge a jar, a Leighton jar, and they'd give you a series of really, really strong shocks. So it was used as a
therapy.
It was called electrotherapy, and the idea, it was to stimulate health and to restore electrical equilibrium within the body. So sometimes it did cure disease, both minor and major. And there was a paper in 1819 where they had 8,680 patients admitted for this electrotherapy.
So they were really going for it.
They loved it. 3,962 were considered cured. 3,308 were relieved. So that's an 84% success rate within this paper.
Right.
And then it basically fell out of favour in the early 20th century. It was no longer sort of considered a force within the body because, of course,
electricity.
Yeah, because it was sort of wasn't connected to living things anymore, because they pushed it into like locomotion, locomotives and stuff like that. So,
and light bulbs.
Yeah, so it changed their concept of what electricity was.
So that's quite important. When did that happen?
Just says early 20th century.
Oh, earlier. So 19.
So not.
Oh, not that long ago.
Not
so about 100 years ago.
When they changed it, when electricity became...
when we started to have electrical goods in the house, for example.
Yeah, and things like that. Then our mind changed.
Packaged as electricity is in these,
and it's completely different, like, commodity, if you like.
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with
our bodies,
illness or anything.
The way we work.
Yeah.
Or...
It was to do with, the changing of the times, I suppose. So there's a French botanist, but also lots of other scientists who basically...
What's funny?
Just kept doing these experiments to themselves. And basically they ended up with completely obliterated nervous systems. So they had tremors, they had what they called uncommon pain. They would become paralysed. They'd have chronic neurological illness. They'd have gout. They'd have pain in the head, a giddiness, a humming noise, twinkling lights in the vision, and a violent sense of being cold.
Wow.
And they were doing this, and these people were getting iller and iller, but still not connecting the dots, which is,
sounds like now.
Yeah, exactly. Not that different, is it? Exactly. No one's connecting the dots. But the interesting thing when they did it, so basically in this book, this whole bit here at the end, that is all the references to all the papers.
Wow.
So I don't know if you can see it. So all of that there. So that's how good this book is. How
it's well
researched. So some of these things, what they found out was they were age and sort of gender were influencing factors. So they found there was a greater effect on mature young men. Now think about the Spanish flu. That attacked.
It was all the
mature young men.
Yeah, because they covered it by saying about the war, didn't they? That it was picked up in the trenches.
So it's interesting that's, and this is what they're saying.
So the people that it affects most in the social demographic are young men.
Young men, yes. Less affects the elderly and infants, and women women tended to be charged more positively and have more positive effects from any therapy, from the electric stuff.
Is that because we're more positive beings, Tash?
Who knows? But this is what I found interesting. Adults and persons with a more robust temperament, more hot-blooded, more fiery, are more susceptible to the movement of this substance, was a quote from somebody. So it seems that people could cope with it.
If they were a bit fiery in their personality.
Yeah, they tended to be able to, not react.
Take it.
Yeah, take the hit. lick the adapters.
Is that why certain people like to lick electrical goods? Because we can take it.
Such fun.
Yeah.
Such fun. And then in 1748, a debate began, and this debate was very much of the times within all the magazines, wouldn't it, and papers and stuff, and obviously wouldn't be the television.
That's 1748. That's that 1748.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that time again called the Enlightenment period, where we got Pasteur, we got all this kind of big kind of
major
I think
things.
I think it was definitely a reset and controlled whatever's.
So it had been like in the books and the magazines at the times, you had these two people. You had a guy called Morin, who claimed himself to be electrical sensitive. So he was sensitive to electricity, and that was his self-proclaimed thing.
Okay.
And Hollett, who had obviously different views. So Morin thought of it as a kind of atmosphere and exhalation that surrounded material bodies, including living bodies, and communicates itself to others by proximity. So that was Morin. So he was the guy who was sensitive to electric.
So he thinks it's kind of in the atmosphere, and it's around everything.
Yes,
material,
and it communicates.
And therefore, as it comes, it can communicate.
We're all telling, telling stories. Whereas Mr. Nollet, he thought it was a substance that flowed in a direction from one place to another that could not flow out unless more of it flowed in from somewhere else in the world at will.
To push it along.
So that's like the two different. So one's saying it's just abundant.
It's everywhere.
And
the other one's saying no, it's a sort of finite thing. That
yeah,
you have
it's
a
bit like turning a light switch on and having a bulb go on, isn't it? So he had that more sort of like Edison type. Kind of like
left brain.
Yeah.
I do that and this happens.
And then the other thing that was interesting, there were some people who were just completely insensitive to all electrical energy. They were completely indifferent. They could bear any amount of strength, really, really long applications. They could be saturated in it, and they would come out neither better nor worse.
Wow. So there were people who you could put loads of electricity through. And that's weird.
And they just would not have,
So would they not get, if we turned it right up, would they not get an electric shock?
Apparently
so
some
is
people...
that why some people that get struck by lightning survive?
Probably. But this was interesting. So the effects of electricity as reported in the 18th century. So the therapeutic things were things like change in pulse rate. So if your pulse rate was too high, then you bring it down. Increased body temperature, pain relief, muscle tone, help with lactation, urination, defecation, that sort of thing, help you shit and piss. Help you squirt, piss and shit. Just lick your charger. And the world is good again. That's why I did it. It's all about that.
I'm going to wet myself.
It's all about my lactation.
Oh, don't make me laugh, Tash.
And then the non-therapeutic effects. We got things like dizziness, nausea, headaches, nervousness, irritability, depression, insomnia, all the things I suffer with. It's more that licking, isn't it? Bloody hell. Backache, heart palpitations. It's like
shit, they are all your...
I get all of these. Very like non-thing. This actually is very much describing like a fibromyalgia, which I do believe to this day is... I think people who are diagnosed with fibromyalgia are electromagnetically sensitive.
Yeah, probably.
I think that's what they're describing. So that's at that time they did admit that there were non-therapeutic effects as well as good effects.
Okay.
Which is quite loads more non-therapeutic effects.
Yeah.
Ringing in the ears. It's all the common stuff. Ringing in the ears. Respiratory infections.
Yes.
Itching. Sure. Oh my God, I itch all the time.
Yeah.
Constipation. See, and then you just have... For other people, they shit themselves, and others they get constipated. You can't win, can you?
It's got so diarrhea and constipation.
Yeah, so it either makes you shit and piss yourself, or not shit and piss yourself. But then it says in here, some people, obviously everybody, that's the thing, right? It's probably
metallic taste.
Metallic taste.
Do you remember when we were ill last year?
Yes,
and I had that
metallic.
We both had metallic
and
taste
that weird
in our mouth.
skin thing.
Oh man, it was like the skin was on fire. I think we were being targeted though through that
sensitivity.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that we hear all of those today, although they're very common kind of like things, and they did admit that they were, and also why it couldn't carry on as a treatment, because the opposite can happen. You might go in for something good and it could give you the exact opposite, basically, because they couldn't tell who was sensitive and who wasn't.
Yeah, so there was a gamble as to whether it was really going to help you
or not, or whether you're going to end up getting worse yourself off. And lactating all over the place when you don't want to. Can you imagine that? And I tell you what they did use it for as well, is abortion back in the day. So it did
what, to spontaneously
abort, it was actually used
spontaneous
for abortion.
Miscarriage or whatever.
So it's quite interesting. So in 1859, the City of London basically became electric. When they put all the electric wires up, they went to mainly, I think it started with businesses and stuff before homes, didn't it? But it basically went electric, and there were 2.5 million inhabitants at the time, and they all experienced electricity in London. In London.
All right.
So in 1869, so almost 10 years later, there was a guy, MD, so a medical doctor called George Beard, and he started describing this new disease. He considered it to be the stress of modern day living.
Right.
And it's basically called neurasthenia. So neurasthenia. And he sort of wrote it as being something called weak nerves. People never died from it. And again, it would attack at random. It was seen there was no pattern. There was no connection as to who would get it, who wouldn't get it.
So you couldn't catch it off someone?
Couldn't catch it, no. And the word sort of nervous was used for centuries, and it was meaning like a nervous disorder, not how it's used today. So things like epilepsy, paralysis, tremors, contractures, weakened intellect, that was what was considered nervous. A nervous illness was considered that.
Not your nervous system.
No, so that changes. So interestingly, also things like gout, tetanus, certain blindness and deafness were also considered nervous disorders at that time in clinical medicine. So that word's obviously changed over time.
Yeah.
And then I found it fascinating because there's a few other things they spoke about in this book about where things have been changed as well. So basically, the terminology sort of changed. So neurology was the same as neuroanatomy now. So basically neurology is the word that we would use for neuroanatomy, which is just explaining
the brain.
Yeah. So this is really interesting. So then we go into the terms hysterical and hypochondriac. I told you this, didn't I, the other day?
Yeah.
So they were terms to describe conditions, and they were not conditions of the mind. So hysteria is a Greek word, and it means uterus. And basically it explains neurological diseases that have origins in the internal organs for women.
So not just the womb, any internal
stuff,
in women.
For women. And then to describe the same illness in men, it was called hypochondria. Now, isn't it strange how though hysteria has stuck with women? Oh, she's hysterical. And
she's hysterical.
And hypochondria is stuck with men.
Oh, he's got man flu.
Yeah. So it's interesting that those two words have stuck with us, even though they've turned them into like
other
meaning things. So hysteria was to describe illness in the intestines, in that sort of area, and female problems as well. And then the hypochondria in men. So it's basically the stomach, the bowels, any digestion basically. And then illnesses that weren't internal, so things like palpitations, dizzy, vertigo, anything like that, that was considered a nervous illness. So that's the nervous side of it. So then they started renaming all these things, and in 1894 a psychiatrist wrote a paper claiming that neurasthenia, which is still a really common illness today, as we know, he basically said that there was no external cause in it, and it must be accepted as completely normal behaviour in the stresses of everyday life. And at that very, very point, they stopped any further research in it. It became basically mental health. That's how they turned it into mental health. So because of this man, millions and millions of people are taking things like Xanax, Prozac, all of those things, rather than cleaning up the environment around them, basically, because they then, he basically turned it into, it's a common illness, it's this, that and the other. There's no outside environmental cause that we can find, therefore
there's something wrong with your mental health.
Yes, there's something wrong with your mental health. So then that further went on, and then
so that was 1894.
1894, and then Sigmund Freud, he then renamed the neurasthenia and he called it anxiety neurosis, known today as panic disorder. And he ended the search for any physical cause of any neurasthenia by reclassifying it as a mental health disease.
Wow.
And if you look in here and you look at,
you think about how many of our young kids are having really bad mental health issues with anxiety, social anxiety,
panic disorder, panic attacks. So this is now, if you the general anxiety things: irritability, heart palpitations, shortness of breath, sweating, tremors, shivering, hunger, diarrhea, vertigo, nausea, vomiting, insomnia, rheumatic pains, the same as that we were describing.
Urination.
Frequent urination again.
Exhaustion.
We're describing the non-therapeutic side effects
of electricity.
Of the electricity. So what I found really interesting is, so basically there were a couple of flu outbreaks that happened prior to any changing that we as humans did. That we're aware of we did. But they were considered then. So you've got atmospheric electricity, and when that changes, that can cause problems within the body.
Yeah, because with the Spanish flu, I remember talking to a woman, Deanne, in America, and she'd done a lot of research, and the radio, international radio,
exactly what it is,
started at that time, and then the reaction of the electromagnetic field suddenly being charged right across the plane or realm or whatever you want to call it, and that was the way that they covered it up.
But also atmospheric electricity means the weather, natural things that have happened. So basically the events before that were considered to be caused by extreme weather, which did cause bouts of flu.
Okay.
Bouts of flu prior to the ones that we know about.
Magnetic weather systems can cause flu type
it did. So in 1889 and before that was
what it was.
There was solar what's it called?
Solar flares?
Solar flares, sunspots, and atmospheric electricity did cause outbreaks of flu throughout the whole.
Because the solar flares and all of that affect the electromagnetic field of the
So there are natural ways that it still could have been influenced by humans, who knows? But there are forces within the atmosphere that can change due to the nature of whatever we are.
The electromagnetic atmosphere around us. And we know from the stuff we've done on the patents with weather modification stuff that they also do use stuff to affect the electromagnetic.
They definitely do. So you were just talking about the Spanish flu. So basically, there's a quote this from 1799, and this guy, Noah Webster. If the atmosphere is at times electrified beyond the degree which is usual and necessary to preserve the body in a due state of excitement, the nerves must be too highly excited, and under a continued operation of undue stimulus become extremely irritable and subject to debility.
In other words, make you ill.
Make you ill. So there's basically been, it says here, the Earth's electromagnetic environment has changed 6 times in history. So in 1889, the power line harmonic radiation began.
So that was when they started
all the electricity, all the lines,
power lines across the country,
across the world.
Started
here and in Europe, America a bit later.
Right.
But so basically across everywhere. And it affected all life on Earth. So the power line age was ushered in by the 1889 pandemic of influenza. So that was the first connection of electromagnetism changes to that. And then 1918, exactly as you said, the radio era began.
Mm-hmm.
And it began with building hundreds of powerful radio stations at LF and VLF frequencies. Mm-hmm. These frequencies are guaranteed to most alter the magnetic sphere. So that those two particular frequencies.
And the VLF.
Yeah. So the radio era was ushered in by the Spanish influenza pandemic of 1918.
1918, yeah.
And then 1957, the radar era began.
Oh, I hate radar.
And it began with the building of hundreds of powerful early warning radar stations that littered high latitudes of the northern atmosphere, hurling millions of watts of microwave energy skyward. Low frequency components of these waves rode on the magnetic field lines to the southern hemisphere, polluting that as well. So the radar era was ushered in by the Asian flu pandemic of 1957.
Because they hadn't sort of been so effective before.
Yeah.
And I used to have nightmares about radar.
Oh, I don't like radar either. No, I don't like radar
technology.
I used
to have like nightmares about
proper
it.
Nightmares.
Yeah.
And then in 1968, the satellite era began. So it began with the launch of dozens of satellites whose broadcast power was relatively weak. But since they were already in the magnetosphere, they had a big effect on the small amount of radiation that managed to enter it from sources on the ground. So the satellite era was ushered in by the Hong Kong flu pandemic of 1968. And then the two other milestones of technology, the beginning of the wireless era and the activation of HAARP. But again, it's discussed further on in this book. I didn't read up to that point yet. So that's obviously the most ongoing.
Yeah, so basically every big pandemic
is connected to
correlates
with change in the magnetic
sphere. And obviously we've now got EMFs and all of this.
Oh yeah, and if you think about it, it makes sense, doesn't it? So they poison the water, they poison our food, they poison the air, they also poison something that we don't really know an awful lot about, as in it's not discussed. People don't think we're electric beings, even though it's obvious from our heart.
Yeah.
The fact that they start heart, you know, with an electrical current, but it's not mainstream.
No.
So of course they do something to the electrical magnet. You know, it's essential to us as water and air.
Yeah, it's a way of weakening us, making us sick.
Yeah.
And keeping us.
And doing these pandemics. I mean, Christ.
Yeah.
They have a big effect on everything, don't they? I mean, that's basically their hidden weapon, isn't it? They can do that to us, then.
Yeah. So Tash, I haven't done very much research this week.
I bet she has. She doesn't need it. She's got it all in her head.
I kind of have got it in my head, but I feel like I'm repeating myself really, because I'm always banging on about electromagnetism, aren't I? To do with, well, I kind of talk about it more in a sort of wooey sense, but it ties in with what you're saying about, because we are electromagnetic, we are affected by the electromagnetic energy around us. And as I've said before in previous podcasts, we live in a soup of electromagnetism, and we only are aware and see 0.0035% of what is there in our atmosphere.
Just in general, like colours.
In general, that's light.
Just all of it.
All of it. So you know, we're not even seeing 0.5%, half. You know, do you know what I mean? It's just such a tiny amount of what is there.
Just while we're there, that thing we talked about that on Instagram about the colour purple. So the fact that we don't see the colour purple through our eyes, we see it, we imagine it through. I think that's fascinating.
Through our like third eye.
Yeah, through our, not imagination. That's wrong, but yes, it's
we put it together.
Yes, we don't actually see it with our eyes. So the and magenta. So anything on the magenta.
And
I can't see this purple. It doesn't exist.
Can you see the purple curtain behind me?
And the purple. No. But actually, we don't see it like we see all the other colours. And it's interesting how that's the colour purple, how it's used by royalty.
Yes.
But we'll do a little thingy on that anyway, because we found a really interesting lady on Instagram.
Yeah, we will. We'll follow
into that.
We'll follow
so that's kind of like what you mean, isn't it? When you say you can't always see things how we think we see them.
We think we see them, and actually we're seeing just this tiny little slither. And sort of our brain is putting it all together. But so we're in this sea of electromagnetic energy. As you say, we are electromagnetic beings. Electromagnetism of natural electromagnetism that hasn't been meddled with and, you know, tweaked or whatever, or corrupted, because that's what I see this as. What you're talking about is a corruption of the natural electromagnetic energy that
stops us being functioning as we should be functioning.
Exactly. So it protects us, but it also feeds us, because every single cell is electrically charged. It protects us from EMF. I've had that many times, haven't I? And I've said, you know, if you're having problems with, you know, EMF, you're having physical problems with it, ground barefoot on the earth. I know you don't like barefoot.
Do it with my feet. No.
Or get a grounding shade.
I do barefoot with my feet.
I do it with my feet.
I meant my hands.
Feet. Yeah. Your spare feet, which you call your hands.
I do walk on my hands and stand on my hands a lot.
Do that, Tash.
I can do it with my feet.
In the summer, I should expect to see you walking on your hands at all times. But
grounding.
Yes. Just don't worry about me ever.
But that would work though, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter that
you've got oh, my hands are really dirty. But you've got secondary energy centres in the centre of your palm and the centre of your foot.
Anyway.
Yeah. So if you wanted to walk on your hands, do feel free.
I just don't like standing on grass.
I know you don't, but what, you're all right on sand and in
I
water.
love sand and
all
water.
of that. Just
anything. Connect with the ground, with the real ground, not concrete. Basically.
Not concrete, and also that's why I think we're all wearing trainers, because it insulates, just stops you from getting anything. So we're kind of being cut off from the natural feeding of our electromagnetic field through the earth.
Yeah. So leather shoes.
Leather's fine.
So leather soles are good. Yeah.
But how many of us wear leather shoes? I love
in the summer. I do.
Yeah,
but not leather soles. I've got lovely, like the Indian leather soles.
Yeah, and I mean, you can buy grounding shoes, but you can't bloody bend them. They're really stiff. And you can buy grounding sheets. I have trouble staying grounded, so I have a grounding sheet on my bed. They're expensive, but my lovely sister bought me mine. And
do you plug them in still? Yeah. I haven't got the copper or something.
No, it just takes the earth. It's not using any electricity. It just takes the earth. And you can, like, if I'm camping or something, not that I ever camp, so I hate it. But you can unplug it and take it with you. It's still charged for a few nights. So
okay. I've got a pillowcase like that. I've never used it though.
Try it, Tash, because I tell you what happened with me. I just slept so much better.
Oh really?
Yeah, I just was like, my head hit the pillow. It's like boom, I'm gone. Okay. And I'm still like that now with it. It's great. I love it. And how does it protect you? Well, it, getting grounded and everything, it feeds that electromagnetic frequency, your personal frequency, and it makes it stronger. So therefore your cells are then fed more, and so it's just your energy levels will be higher and all of that. Electromagnetism holds energy and information. Okay, and I've touched on this before. It's our access to the quantum in terms of psychic ability. I mean, now this is getting a bit wooey now, but what I'm pointing out is that messing up and interrupting the electromagnetic fields of the earth and of us will also stop us from accessing higher dimensions or
higher consciousness.
Higher consciousness, exactly. So again, I'm always banging on, they're trying to stop the ascension process from happening, so they're trying to interrupt that all the time. But the electromagnetic has information that our bodies and our minds need. And we know we are electric, our heart, all our synapses in our brain, we're constantly, if you could see in fact, I remember when I was writing something for a talk in, I think it's 2019, 2018, and a man can charge a bulb. I think we're slightly less, but we're generating enough electricity to actually light a bulb.
Precious metal, don't you, to kind of do it,
conduct it. So we're generating that.
I feel great from Aurora, the dog. I feel her electromagnetism really strong. If her heart's anywhere near me, it doesn't feel like a normal heartbeat. It's really magnetic.
It's the only way I can describe it. Because you're connected.
I don't know. It's just when I say, so well, feel a heart. It's different. It's not. It's got like a different something.
It's putting out a frequency. That you
it's
can
what
really
I can pick up.
feel.
It's a frequency. Yeah.
So any interruption or interference of our electromagnetic field also interrupts our quantum coherence, right? And I know this is getting really technical,
it's
but our quantum coherence affects our gene expression.
Yes.
And how our genes are triggered and not triggered, i.e. if, in a negative way, it will trigger genes that
don't react in the proper way. So you can basically mutate a gene.
Exactly.
With the magnetic
that's what
influence. With the wrong, obviously, like you say, we're meant to have it right. If it's in harmony,
yes,
everything's fine. But the minute it's interrupted, it can basically have an effect on us at a DNA level, at a genetic level.
Absolutely, genetic level. So these interruptions aren't just sort of
making us
the
have
outwards, or giving us a snotty nose or something. They're actually affecting our DNA, our gene expression,
and that's what we pass on to the next generation.
Yes, so that's why
it's slowly changing.
Yeah, and also when you look at, I've mentioned the children that I'm looking at, my kids, and that sort of age group, how much anxiety and like we said, just this social anxiety and panic attacks and all of that. It's rife.
It's very so, and that's our older kids.
Yes,
more so. That sort of millennial, 1995.
Yeah, my oldest.
Yeah,
my
they're
youngest.
The same sort of age. But they're both
doesn't really have.
No, they don't. They seem to have
a bit of social anxiety, but not to the same degree. But compared to our generation, I mean, it just wasn't.
No one
had
it. No, I don't know anyone who was.
So we've had children who are more sensitive to interruptions in the electromagnetic field,
which has an effect on there,
which has probably come through our gene expression from the electromagnetic interruptions that we've had. So do you see what I mean? It's like it's deteriorating our DNA.
And changing it, and then we kind of evolve.
Yeah.
And our bodies are very clever at evolving.
Yes.
And then we become slightly different. But then, like you said, the generation, the 17, 18, 19-year-olds seem to have missed that again. Like it's almost like it's kind of a rolling thing.
It is.
And it can, we are strong enough as humans to be able to pop out of it again to a point, and then they probably put it on even more, and then you get another level of like depression. And then, do you know what I mean? It's the body is so clever, isn't it?
The body will always try to heal itself.
Yeah.
And if you give it the right ingredients, it will heal in right environment. It will heal itself. It's amazing
the immune system, whatever the immune system is
whatever it is. I feel like we're just an organism now.
Or like probably is the electrical side of it that heals us.
Yes. Yeah. Because it feeds each cell.
Yeah.
And all of the exchanges between cells, they're all done by electrical pulse. So you get that right.
Like resonance or whatever, similar sort of thing to that. A bit like how viruses are caught. It's done through a communication.
It's a communication. It's a chemical reaction, but there is a firing of charge. Yeah.
When you think neurons in the brain, that's a firing.
Yeah, all the synapses.
Yeah, if you think of all the terminology is all electrical. We are electrical beings, aren't we? We're cells almost, aren't we?
Yeah, we're like we're our own little, and then collectively we come together and then we make massive amounts of
lickable.
Yeah, lickable
technology.
We just suck cables.
I love my lickable technology.
Yeah, forget touchscreen.
I've never done it with these ones. It was only what's it called, an Amstrad or something?
Yeah.
Do you remember them? And you just get them.
They were like a cassette
thing,
and it was Pac-Man. Or was it the tennis?
I had Space Invaders.
Oh yeah.
An Atari or something. I can't remember what
it was. Atari.
Something
it was,
like that, wasn't it? Yeah. But yeah, I've never done it with like mobile phones or real plugs. I haven't sat there sort of like licking my hairdryer plug or anything.
Well, please don't start, Tash. Please don't start. But I do wonder if that's why when we go away or we're on retreat or we come away from everything, when we go abroad and we're
just less
in the
dependent on...
and grounded barefoot, why everyone feels so much better when they, do you know what I mean, come out? Because obviously if you're living in an urban environment and, you've got it all around you all day anyway. We're living in this sea of it, and instead of it, if it's not the good stuff, it's attacking us, kind of, or it's interrupting, and other electromagnetics, the natural stuff on the earth, feeds it. So
feeds into it.
We can what's the word? We can combat it. By doing the grounding stuff that I'm always banging.
But then they come up with something more and more powerful each time, don't they? And always under the guise of communication, it would seem.
Oh yes, connectability.
It's always under the it's always that, isn't it? It's never.
I mean, I think that's what we're seeing. Is we don't know these towers and masts and all that. We don't know. I mean, I know that those frequencies can also be changed to good frequencies that aid in. Because you can turn it to frequencies.
Well, it proves with the book, though, doesn't it, that it was healing some people. Some people, it was miraculous to some, whilst dangerous for others.
Yeah.
So it's that same.
And for others, it didn't have any effect.
And nothing at all, no matter how highly charged. Can you just imagine all those mad professors and that of their time? Right then, let's lick the Amstrad, the Atari, whatever it's called. No, but can you imagine them literally going, right, let's rub up a ball and literally all charging each other? And like, what a weird life.
And jumping around.
And then afterwards, they couldn't like lift their hands for like 3 or 4 days afterwards by the electric charge.
But then they do it again.
They do it again and again and again.
Insane. Anyway,
allegedly.
Allegedly, again, yes, because this is his story. We don't know that it's 100%, but this is what is documented, and it's interesting that it's always that mid 1700s.
Yeah, that was
seemed to be a real kind of we've got to grab hold of science and religion,
turn it into what we want,
Yeah. So there was
prior to that would have been the old world, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
When everything was lovely and electricity
didn't exist.
The natural electricity existed only.
Yeah. And we were all living in perfect synchronicity with our environment.
Yeah.
Which is, what we're supposed to be doing.
Sad, really, isn't it?
It is sad. But hey ho, we're
one last thing I just quickly say, just that I found it interesting because
just
animals in general don't seem to get the same afflictions that we get from
Don't they get ill?
Well, they do, but not to the extent, like animals just in general don't. It seems to affect us, you know. I know they can't tell us if they're having palpitations or feeling a bit suicidal or what have you. But what I'm trying to say is, on the whole, they tend to be stronger with
more
it.
Resilient.
More resilient. However, when they were caused by natural things, so when it was the solar flares and the sunspots and the extreme electricity in the atmosphere, everything got very, very sick.
Everything.
All the animals did. Tree life, plant life, everything. Okay. So there's a difference when it was a natural occurrence compared to something that's been meddled with. I just thought I'd put that in there. Because it's true, isn't it? Animals on the whole, they don't suffer from anxiety and stress and, you know, stuff like that. Whereas apparently at these points it was,
so when everything got very sick. Global kind of shifts in atmospheric electricity or whatever. Yeah. Actually, all life was affected by it. Yeah. It just shows.
So just thought it was worth just.
Yeah, this is an electromagnetic realm. This is an electromagnetic. This planet is electromagnetic.
Could it just be natural shifts?
Yeah.
Natural, just stuff that happens.
And I'm convinced that, you know, the quantum stuff, the healing, the psychics, all that shit is electromagnetic.
Yeah, and that's why they want to.
And why it's just been forced into being just about powering up, you know, a stereo or plugging something in.
Consumer. It's all about consumerism, isn't it? And convenience.
What it's.
And life force.
Life force, which is what it actually is. It's your chi.
Chai, yes, it talks about chi and chai in there. But anyway, that is such a good book. I really recommend reading it.
So I'll put the deets of the book in the description. And yeah, thank you very much, Tasha, for that enlightening book review.
1700 info.
Well, you know, we're trying to unpick, you know, and understand where we are and
what the fuck is going on.
Yeah, and what we can do
what the fuck it's all about.
Yeah, and what we can do to keep ourselves healthy.
Absolutely.
I have to build lead houses with no electricity in them. That would be horrible, wouldn't it, Tash?
Oh,
lead house. No, we just need to go and be outside more, live more roomily.
Just not live cold.
Yeah,
that makes us stay in, and I hate the cold. Anyway, we're waffling now.
Right, well, waffle. We'll see you next week.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye.